Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time we're talking about Metroid Prime Trilogy HD and whether it can still come to Nintendo Switch. So, I personally have been under the belief that yes, Metroid Prime Trilogy HD is a real thing, and it will come to Nintendo Switch, but closer to the release for Metroid Prime 4, which is why we haven't seen it yet. However, there has been growing skepticism because it has been taking so long to be announced, but also because recently, an ex-lead designer from Retro Studios, Michael Wakan, is expressing skepticism about this game coming to Switch. So we're going to be talking about that, breaking it down, but then also talking about why, despite all of this skepticism, it still makes sense for Metroid Prime Trilogy HD to come to Switch. So that's what we're focusing on today. Now before we jump into things, let me very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It's linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. So basically, this whole series of comments was popularized by Gladiatrix on Twitter. This is the initial person that shared this information, and to be honest with you, I saw it a couple days ago, and I thought about it for a moment, but that was it, for a moment. I didn't really decide to make a video on this until it picked up some steam, and I saw the growing skepticism for Metroid Prime Trilogy HD on the internet, and it was at that point I decided to make this video. But anyway, point is, Michael Wakan had some comments on Facebook in response to someone expressing excitement for Metroid Prime Trilogy, and basically he was saying he doesn't think it's happening, so let's go ahead and read exactly what he had to say. I was a lead designer on all 3 original games, ran the Trilogy compilation project, was a lead designer on Donkey Kong Country Returns. The biggest issue is Retro no longer has functional editor tools to work with a Prime code base, so everything has to be brute force hard-coded. Rebuilding the hundreds of interaction sets in Metroid Prime 3 alone, not to mention retuning the gameplay to take in the slower management pacing of conventional controls, would probably take a year with a 4 to 5 person team full-time by itself. I built all those games, LOL, and the gyro can't do it. I suspect that old GameStop listing was an error or prank. That would take a lot of effort, so I am pretty skeptical it will happen. It was straightforward to update Metroid Prime 1 and 2 to motion controls, but converting Metroid Prime 3 to normal controls would be a Herculean effort, as it is scripted very specifically using volumetric triggers to detect the motion in precise manners to do specific switches, and the bosses are tuned to take into account the ease of gestural aiming. So these are my takeaways from what Michael's saying here. Yes, transitioning the motion controls to traditional controls probably is challenging, but it's also not impossible. And this person no longer works for Retro Studios or Nintendo. They wouldn't really know what's going on behind the scenes over the last few years. Not necessarily. So just because this person is expressing skepticism, it isn't any sort of clear deconfirmation of Metroid Prime Trilogy HD, and it isn't any confirmation that it's impossible either, because here he says that it is possible. It would just require a Herculean effort by his definition, which apparently is a handful of people working on it for a year, but that's just in relation to transitioning the motion controls. They probably would still need a larger team, but with something as hyped and in great demand as Metroid Prime Trilogy, I feel like Nintendo could definitely find a good team to outsource it to, like Tantalus or Grezzo, or still have Retro do it, or somebody. I feel like if there's enough demand, it can absolutely still happen. But before we talk about this demand for Metroid Prime in more detail, I want to talk about something else. His sort of thought process in terms of it being very difficult to do. Because I noticed something very interesting about this. We've seen this before, actually. So let's talk about Skyward Sword HD. We know about it now, it's a real thing, it's coming out this July, and a lot of us Zelda fans are very excited for it. But the thing about Skyward Sword is that it was also a very long rumored game, similar to Metroid Prime. It was years ago that we initially heard about it coming to Switch, and it did not happen, so people were starting to think it would not become a reality, but lo and behold, it is a reality. Even Eiji Aonuma, the Zelda director himself, at a Zelda concert, teased Skyward Sword to us. However, after that moment, there were different interviews that came out that started to suggest otherwise. Even Aonuma himself sort of suggested that it might not be that easy to do. It would be nearly impossible. Something similar to what Michael is saying about Metroid Prime Trilogy. So let me go ahead and read you this excerpt in an interview between Eiji Aonuma and Game Informer. One new element many fans have clamored for in a potential remake of Skyward Sword is to remove the motion controls. For those hoping that is a possibility, Aonuma has some bad news. So you're saying control it all with buttons? He says with an incredulous squint. That's a little hard. I think it might be close to impossible. So do you notice something very interesting here? What Eiji Aonuma is saying in this interview sounds a lot like what Michael is saying about Metroid Prime Trilogy. Yet what happened with Skyward Sword? It became a reality. So, the point I'm making here is that despite this ex-Nintendo Retro Studios employee who hasn't worked with the company for years saying that it would be very hard to do, it's not actually impossible, it's just close to impossible. It can still happen. Skyward Sword was rumored for years, just like Prime Trilogy. There were people that said it would be very hard to port it over with traditional controls and such. But it happened, so I feel like the same could still apply for Metroid Prime. Heck, we even now have Mario Galaxy on the Switch as well. So it's definitely possible to get this happening. If there's enough demand, Nintendo likely will do it. And on the note of demand, there's been a clamoring for Metroid Prime on Switch for a very long time. There is definitely a recurring buzz with Metroid. People have wanted Metroid Prime Trilogy HD on Switch. I think it's happening. Many people think it's happening, actually. A lot of industry insiders or journalists who get these sources have been saying Metroid Prime Trilogy will be coming to Switch. It's been supposedly done for a very, very long time. There's a number of people. I'll link a few of them in the description below just so you can kind of see the list or some of the list of people who have a pretty good track record of having inside information. The point is, Metroid Prime Trilogy, similar to Skyward Sword, is one of those worst kept secrets by Nintendo in terms of being something that's coming to Switch. I think it's still definitely happening. It really just comes down to timing. Supposedly Metroid Prime Trilogy HD was done a long time ago, and the speculation has been that the reason we haven't seen it yet is because Metroid Prime 4 was delayed. So Prime Trilogy, it appears, is being held back until Prime 4 is closer to release, so they can help to build that momentum for the Metroid franchise, which kind of makes sense to me. A lot of us are under the impression that there's something going on with Metroid at E3 this year. It may be Prime Trilogy, it may be a Prime 4 teaser. I myself believe it will at least be a reveal of a 2D Metroid game. But we've also seen some information from this ongoing case between Apple and Epic that there were plans to add Samus to Fortnite. Why is that a big deal? Because even though it may or may not happen, it is suggestive that Nintendo has this plan to market the Metroid franchise. So they're gonna want to push multiple things. Maybe they get Samus in Fortnite, maybe they have some sort of mobile event at Mario Kart Tour, maybe they have a Spirit event in Smash Brothers, maybe they add another character from the Metroid series, maybe there's a whole bunch of crazy commercials, maybe they have a Prime 4 teaser at the Game Awards. There's a number of things they may do to help push the Metroid franchise, and one of the best ones they can do is probably bring Metroid Prime Trilogy HD. We've already seen some examples of this on the Switch. For example, Bayonetta 1 and 2. They're on the Switch and we know we're getting Bayonetta 3. No More Heroes 1 and 2. Those are on the Switch and we know we're getting No More Heroes 3. You see the trend here? And actually, we also got Pikmin 3 Deluxe, and maybe we may be seeing Pikmin 4 not too long from now as well. The point is, there is some sense to be made in terms of having Prime Trilogy on the Switch. Get that out there first, get fans acquainted to the series, so it can help to build up more momentum for the eventual massive release of Metroid Prime 4. It's going to be a big deal when this game finally arrives, and Nintendo wants to make sure it's a banger. The way we've seen Nintendo talk about Metroid Prime 4, it is very similar to Breath of the Wild, which to me is a very, very big deal. This could be the game that puts Metroid truly on the map and leads to recurring, frequent releases of the Metroid franchise. And Nintendo's going to do their best to push that. So I do think Prime Trilogy is on the way. I believe that nearly 100%. You can never be 100% with these things because, again, it is a rumor. Until Nintendo confirms it themselves, you can never be too sure. And actually, even then, you can never be too sure because delays happen, cancellations happen, restarts happen. So, for sure, take it with a grain of salt, but still, I believe Metroid Prime Trilogy is still happening and it's coming to the Nintendo Switch. It's not a matter of if, it's simply a matter of when. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.